What's up, y'all? My name is Dan. So here I'm going to be talking about American Airlines and their transatlantic flights since summer 2022, as well as the aircraft they're going to be using on each route and their future plans on the transatlantic market. American Airlines, the largest airline in the United States, is going to be flying 419 weekly flights in 48 transatlantic routes this summer to 16 destinations in Europe, India, and the Middle East. It's not nearly as great of a transatlantic network as our Delta Airlines or United, especially with Americans' bigger focus on domestic travel in Latin America, as well as the dwindling of European operations thanks to the retirement of some aircraft types that American used to fly to Europe during the pandemic, but it still plays a significant role in the transatlantic market. Currently in 2022, American's main transatlantic hub is at New York JFK. The airline in recent years had been heavily reducing their capacity at this airport, while shifting most of their connecting traffic via Philadelphia. Either way, the airline has been struggling to make the hub at JFK work, so the airline entered a partnership with JetBlue that allows American flights to carry JetBlue's code, and it also makes connections possible at the airport between the two airlines. So American reduced most of their domestic capacity, letting JetBlue take the lead in the domestic short-haul market, while American began increasing their international presence and their market share at JFK, such that this summer American will fly to 10 destinations, including the flights to Delhi and Tel Aviv that began last year, and to Doha that are about to begin soon, as well as the destinations like London Heathrow, Madrid, Milan, Paris, and others. The second transatlantic hub this year is Philadelphia, where the airline will fly to 11 destinations in Europe. This is usually America's largest transatlantic hub. That is not the case this year. The cities that American flies to from Philadelphia are not necessarily the same as the ones from JFK. JFK's are more dependent on local business demand, while Philadelphia's flights are more dependent on connecting leisure passengers in comparison. Most of these flights were suspended during the pandemic, but American will be flying to 11 destinations this year, while the rest might eventually resume in a few years once American receives their Airbus A321 XLR, since many of these were flown on the lower capacity 757s, 767s, and Airbus A330s, all of which have been retired by the airline. Dallas-Fort Worth, American's main hub, is going to have 73 flights per week to 7 cities in Europe, including 4 daily flights to London Heathrow. Many of these are possible thanks to the large local demand, but also because of the huge amount of connections that American offers at this airport, being the largest of American's hubs, mainly to airports in the western side of the country, as well as Texas, Mexico, and others. Chicago O'Hare has been a long-time hub for the airline, and even though American has to an extent scaled back some of their operations at this airport, turning some of their transatlantic flights into seasonals, but the airline this summer is going to have about 9 daily flights from Chicago to 6 destinations. While there's a lot of local demand into the city, connections are also possible to other cities in the Midwest and the western side of the country. Charlotte is America's second largest hub, but American doesn't have as much of a transatlantic presence there as the previous airports, despite all the connections that the airport has. But there are going to be 7 daily flights to 6 routes to Madrid, London, Paris, Rome, and Frankfurt and Munich. The last two are interesting mainly because American doesn't fly to these two cities from their other hubs, except for Dallas to Frankfurt. Miami is the main Latin America hub for the airline, so the airline has a massive number of flights there, while their transatlantic flights are more limited to London, Madrid, Barcelona, and Tel Aviv. Paris flights are suspended, but these passengers can have the ability to connect onto other Latin American destinations from Miami as well as the southern US. American's other hubs, including Phoenix and Los Angeles, only have flights to London Heathrow. Los Angeles with 2 daily, with all the local demand and likely connections from Alaska Airlines, and from Hawaii. While from Phoenix, there are some local demand, but also connections from nearby areas like California, Hawaii, and western Mexico. And lastly, Raleigh, Durham, and Boston with a daily flight to London Heathrow, both of which operate with local demand for the most part, while passengers can connect onto British Airways at Heathrow to fly further. A few flights have been suspended, including Seattle to London Heathrow, which had begun in 2020 and was launched in partnership with Alaska Airlines, when Alaska joined the One World Alliance, where Alaska offered connections on the Seattle end, while British Airways offered them on the Heathrow end. And there's also Dallas-Fort Worth to Tel Aviv, that has been postponed due to lack of deliveries from the Boeing 787 that American was supposed to receive over 2021 and 2022. The fleet that American will be using for these flights include the Boeing 777-300ERs that are going to be mostly used for the busiest routes, such as their routes into London Heathrow from New York, Dallas, Miami, and Los Angeles, as well as flights from New York to Doha, Paris, and Delhi. The Boeing 777-300ER will be used for some of their busiest routes, including the remaining transatlantic flights from New York, every flight from Charlotte, as well as a few flights out of Dallas, Miami, and London Heathrow. The Boeing 787-9 will only fly 4 routes, to Paris from Dallas and Chicago, as well as London from Chicago and Philadelphia. My theory on why this is that these are probably going to be flying to Hawaii and South America. The Boeing 787-8 will mostly fly to less busy routes in Europe, including most of America's operations in Philadelphia and Chicago, as well as Miami to Madrid and Barcelona, and Dallas to Dublin. London is America's main transatlantic destination, with 23 daily flights to New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, Dallas, Fort Worth, Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte, Miami, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Seattle, even though the latter is currently suspended, as well as the cities that British Airways flies to in the US. This is a huge business hub in Europe and a very important airport for business from the US, but even more important when you consider the joint venture between American Airlines and British Airways. And this is British Airways' main hub, offering connections to places in Europe as well as Africa, India, and other places. American also flies to Madrid, the main hub of Iberia, another joint venture partner, which is an important one, offering connections in Spain, Southern Europe, and other parts of the continent, while American also flies to Barcelona from the US, Barcelona being both Level and Welling's main hub, both of which have kosher agreements with American Airlines. Dublin is another important destination with tech business demand, where American flies to from several hubs, this being supported by the kosher agreement with Aer Lingus, which isn't part of One World, but is part of the same company as Iberia and British Airways. In the Aer Lingus kosher, I'm sure also come to play their flights to Shannon and Manchester. Both of these are former American destinations that are currently suspended. Paris and Rome, while not being One World hubs, are still important destinations for the airline in Europe, with multiple flights from several hubs. The same is the case in Athens, except all of Athens' flights are seasonal. American also flies to other important hubs like Frankfurt and Munich from Charlotte, Milan from New York, while Amsterdam and Venice, Lisbon, and Zurich got flights from Philadelphia. Frankfurt and Amsterdam also got flights from Dallas as well. American also flies to Tel Aviv from New York and Miami, while Dallas flights are currently postponed due to the aircraft shortage. While they also co-share with El Al, which has a few destinations in the US. American also recently launched flights to India, with Delhi being their first destination from New York to JFK, using their largest aircraft. And this route has actually been doing really well. Passenger numbers will also likely be boosted by American's partnership with Indigo, which from Delhi flies to two other destinations in India. One odd destination shows that American recently announced that is set to begin soon is Doha in Qatar, the main hub of American's kosher partner, Qatar Airways. American likely launched this flight out of necessity to operate a highly profitable route that might work with the connections that Qatar offers at Doha, especially in the Indian market, while it can also work for a substitute for one of the many Qatar flights out of New York, especially given Qatar's aircraft shortages with both the Airbus A350 paint issues and the lack of Boeing 787 deliveries. The FIFA World Cup that will be hosted in Qatar this year will also likely help this route as well. American also got other transatlantic closure partners from other places, including Finnair, Royal Air Maroc, and Royal Jordanian. The Gulf flies to the US and offer their share of connections in their respective areas. And while this is all of America's transatlantic capacity for 2022, while a few of their routes are currently suspended, whether it's due to the events of the pandemic, the retirement of aircraft, or lack of deliveries, including a lot of American Airlines Philadelphia operations that included a lot of flights to smaller cities in Europe, such as Edinburgh, Manchester, Budapest, and others. But Philadelphia is going to be returning to their former status as their main transatlantic hub in a few years when the Airbus A321 XLR is going to be delivered to American Airlines. So a lot of these routes that are used to be flown the 757, the 767, and the A330s will instead be flown by the XLRs, and even those that used to be seasonal flights will likely become year-round once this aircraft arrives to the fleet. So while America's transatlantic operations have been heavily cut during the pandemic, most of these routes are going to be back once American gets the rest of their 787s and the A321 XLRs to be the extensive network that it once was, but a lot more profitable and efficient. Thanks for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If y'all got any comments, questions, or any feedback, y'all can leave a comment. That's all I got to say, and I'll see y'all later.